Welcome to Stampscaping 101. Let's finish this piece off. I'm going to try to do it quickly without blabbing on as I always do. I love talking stamps, so I tend to do that on videos, replying to people via email, talking with people over the phone, etc. You can never talk about you can never, yeah, I don't know, you can never discuss kind of the things that you really love doing enough, right? And when you're doing it, I'm doing it with other people that kind of are the same mindset. All right, so what I'm doing right here, this is some distress antique linen. I love this color. Okay, you can use it in warm tone scenes, but you can also use it as a really almost undiscernible base layer. And this is a trick that I learned in beginning painting when I was in college. We laid down some sort of base coat. It didn't have to be, it was an antique linen, but it was typically a warm tone like a sepia or a burnt umber, or something like that. And it would be a very diluted version. This is an oil painting, if I didn't mention that, not like watercolor or something of that sort. But what that did, I don't know, when you laid something like this down, and I don't always do it, I don't know, maybe I should, I don't know. But it gives the piece a different overall feel when you have that kind of mixture of both the warm and cool. It's, even if it's very kind of undiscernible in the end result. Now, if I was to do one like this and one without it, and we used, the same blue tones or something like that, like I'm going to use. Let's throw in a gray in this too. I mean, you'd be able to tell, especially in the lighter areas, and there's just a different, I don't know, kind of a different tactile feel to it when you do that. I don't know. I guess it has to do with warmth, right? There's a when you're playing around temperature like that, even if you're doing a very cool scene, maybe having that sub layer of warmth, I don't know, it just gives it a more kind of welcoming feel, and maybe it's slightly more kind of inviting on an emotional level, even if when you're looking at the end result and you're not saying, oh, warmth within cool or something like that, you can just kind of, I don't know, maybe it's on a subconscious level or something like that. Okay, so I'm just laying down the gray right in here. I'm just doing that, I don't know, I wanted to give this a different feel than my last piece finished. Well, this one now has all kinds of purple tones in it, but I don't know, a couple of the recent pieces I did on lighting were just all blue. So this one's, a little bit of warmth, a little bit of gray. I don't like doing, too many of the, similar pieces all together. I like to mix it up, just for myself to keep things interesting. All right, now, one of the things that I've been doing lately, relatively speaking, I've been stamping for, 30 some odd years, more than that. Instead of just getting more and more pads, okay, if I have similar colors in pad form already, I'm not going to get, another pad in a different brand that's similar. But I don't stamp out all of my imagery, in every color that I'd like to color my scenes with. If that's the case, I don't get the pad, I get the reinkers. The reinker bottles like that, I mean, they just hold so much more ink than a pad, okay? This bottle right here, I can probably ink up an entirely blank pad, maybe, I don't know, 6, 7 times or something like that, okay? And these reinkers cost the same amount as a pad, so, and plus, it's about space. With me, just like a lot of you, if you've been stamping a while, you have a lot of stuff, and these inker bottles just, they don't take up very much space. And I just put a little bit on my applicator, whatever it is. If it's a sponge or something like that, you can use that. Or I'm just using a paper towel here. Okay, and laying this down. Now, one of the things I'm not talking about so far is the retention of light. I'm creating this idea of light by retaining some of the lighter areas of my scene. Okay, so right in here I left a little bit of the white of the paper, and down here I left a little of the white of the paper. But now when I'm into kind of these darker colors, especially with this, with such a, decent slathering of ink on there, I'm being careful not to go into my scene. I'm kind of manipulating this a little bit. I'm going with this wet part, okay? And then I'm kind of laying some of that down. And I'm kind of going like this, and I'm using this drier portion right next to it. So you can kind of just go like this, add a little bit down, and then use the drier portion to kind of blend it around. I like to use a glossy cardstock for a lot of my types of applications of layered inks, okay? They just lay on the surface much more than a more absorbent matte paper. A good compromise, though, one of the things that I'm using a lot over this last 12 months, maybe, especially after I got into things like foils and iridescence and, I don't know, vellums, very unconventional surfaces to stamp on. I mean, people have done all that in the past, but just, I don't know, it's not really one of those things that you see a lot of taking place. Okay, but what I've been using is the Mohawk Everyday Digital white coated silk. I've had other types of papers like that in the past. They usually go by the name of dull or satin, meaning they're somewhere in between a matte and a glossy. But you can see how nicely this is layering in there. And hopefully it's picking up on camera. You can see that warmth kind of showing through the blue a little bit, right? Or, I mean, I didn't cover all of those areas up with the blues. The two different blues I've used so far. Did I use two different blues, or is this the first one? Oh, I used gray. Okay, this was the first one. But I didn't put the gray and this first blue over it yet, okay? But this is where you have to kind of watch out right here. Everyone always does this fine, okay? I'm talking about my beginning classes, and, when I used to walk around, I'd get people, before they did this, but, if people are doing this, and they say, whoa, I had a hard time controlling light or lighting. It's because usually when they get to maybe the third layer, fourth layer, or when they just move into the darker colors, and this one will go into a little bit of maybe like a navy blue or something like that, they eradicate the lighter area in here, okay? So which means it's really easy, but you just have to be mindful of it, kind of a conscious awareness of it. Now this one's not so dark, but okay, I just wanted to add in this is a little bit of a Caribbean blue. It's a little bit of a, a little bit more of like a warm blue. Okay. And again, I'm just using this just to get a little bit of a different feel to this one here. Look at this piece of paper. It's making so much noise. Racket. Okay, and that's all we need right there. It's happening pretty fast, right? I think that looks good as is, okay? But let's just go for a little bit more contrast as we work through our value scale. I was talking with someone about Prussian blue. Let me see if I have my Prussian blue pad here. That one's just blue. Oh, this one's the Prussian blue. Okay. Okay, this one's just like a navy blue. Okay, it's just called Blue by Marvy. I'm mixing and matching. I use a couple distress inks on here. Distress inks are thicker than Marvy, so they really make a good base coat because they spread around really nicely, especially on something like the white coated silk. The glossy cardstocks retain more of the dye-based inks on the surface. Dye-based inks work by staining, okay? So if something's a little bit less porous, it's going to be retain more, kind of a little bit more towards the surface. It's not going, quite soaking into the page as much, okay? But that being said, on glossy or matte too, okay? Matte's going to be absorbing a lot faster, and it's going to have a different feel than this, okay? But you can do it, especially if it's cardstock, not like a, copy paper or something like that. But I like going with thicker inks first, and then the Marvies just really make it, I don't know, just easy to add in additional tones. Now this is a very dark tone. I mean, you can see the pad itself, it's almost, it's practically black. But when I add it into this surface right here, it is, laying down on there. I mean, you can see it right there. But see, I'm kind of playing around with viscosities. I don't have to do this. I mean, I could do it all with Memento inks or something like that. And I don't have a huge amount of distress inks. Relatively speaking, I know a lot of you have like all of them, okay? So I'm just talking about, in comparison to that. But if you're working with really thick inks, by the time you get to this ink right here, like maybe the fifth layer, it might not be applying. It's like you're going like this, and it's like nothing is happening. It's because the ink is really kind of built up on the surface, and it's just not applying because you're trying to apply like a wet, damp application of media into something that's already super saturated on the surface. Okay, so that being said, what you can do is you can just, unless you're just working on one piece, you can heat set it a little bit. Don't heat it set it all the way, but just kind of allow it to set up a little bit. Don't let it allow it to dry completely, though, because having it a little bit damp like that allows you to spread things and blend it together easier, okay? So just get some of the moisture out of it. Play around with it. It just depends on where you are, kind of the relative humidity, could be time of year, brand of inks too, and a lot of times it's how much ink you applied on your base layer. If you do it like I did with the re-inker, there was a lot of ink transferred down there, okay? And I use the antique linen too. Okay, this is black, all right? This will be a nice kind of framing device. A lot of times I like to finish off with a little bit of black on the four corners, even if it's like this, okay? You don't have to go in, like an inch or something like that. Watch how I do this, okay? Coming in like this, okay? Now that doesn't read as black, but it's kind of like a gray, okay? That's been applied over the top of these other colors. Okay. One of the things I like to do is I like to kind of anchor down my structures or whatever, things that are on the water, waterfalls, rocks, whatever, with a little bit extra tone. You can manipulate this. You can kind of turn it on edge and dab it, and get a little bit of that. Okay, but let's go on the four corners especially. See this right here? See what that does right there? By going one step darker down here, that lighting seems one step lighter by contrast because we're not working with, officially light. I guess you can call it reflected light coming off our page, but if we turned off all the lights, this would be, completely dark. But we want to give the illusion of lighting coming from within the piece like this, okay? So, what makes that light is the areas that are around it that are darker than it, okay? All right, so anyway, I'm just kind of blending in these branches into the background a little bit more too, like this, okay? And let's do something too. Oh, I'm really starting to pick up some of the, my texture of my paper towel is really harsh there, so I'm getting the texture in there, so. But see this right here? You just kind of blend it in like this because the inks are, fairly moist, so the thing that, here's the thing that kind of doesn't allow you to apply ink so fast, because it's kind of saturated under there, is also the characteristic that allows you to blend it in really easily, okay? So you do want that, you do want that. You want, a lot of ink built up on there. Like that. And that is it. Okay, so we're going to play around with this a little bit more. And we'll show you just how many techniques you can really add into this type of process right here. Let's go with a alcohol pen, and what I like to do is I like to color the side of my cabin. I won't color in the window, so we'll keep the window nice and light. Okay. Can't do that with something like this. This is big for big areas, okay? But you see this, I can kind of get right around in here. And we can leave that window light, like light is coming from within the space. And you can do something too if you want to add a little bit of yellow. Don't add like a super bright canary yellow, but kind of have a duller yellow maybe, or a duller warm tone. That one's really... I don't know if I have... Let me see if I have duller yellow. I think I have it in my other set. Let's see. Let's go with some of this. This might look good down here too. Seeing that warmth down there in the water. So this is really pale, okay? But if you want to add some of that down there, you can like that. All right, I'm going to leave that as is, okay? Let me get a little bit of detailing like this. I'll just take a white acrylic paint pen. You can use your gel pens if you want to. I was using a white gel pen for years until I found these white acrylic paint pens, and they work really fantastic. The gel pens work really good too, and I have no complaints about them, but these ones are just a little bit more versatile and easier to use because they don't have a roller type of ball to them. Okay, and let me put a little bit of this lighting back into that window. Okay, so what I'm doing right here is I'm just adding a little bit of lighting to my rocks, okay? This is the lakeside cabin design, and there is lighting on all of my rocks. I've made my rocks kind of darker on the base area and lighter on the top, and what I've done is I've colored in all those rocks in there. So I've just kind of reintroduced a little bit of that lighting right back into it. It could be one dot. I don't know if these ones look so good over here with that, but I'm going to be doing some other things to the scene. We're going to do some splatter painting because I haven't done that in a little while. I don't think, when I say a little while, even for me not doing it for like 2 weeks or, I don't know, something like that feels like a really long time because I love that technique. Okay, but little sparkles in the water down here. Can you see those little details like that? Those are little details that kind of really make something special if someone takes their card that you give them, they hold it up to them, you know, and they see all these little types of things. Okay, well, one of the things that's occurred to me, that's never occurred to me before I started doing like these bows like this, is when I've done these little highlights on here. I've always done highlights in the past on things, and it occurs to me that with these bows, especially, you know, there's little highlights everywhere in life, okay? Any type of scenario, there are highlights where you're watching this on your phone or tablet or computer. There's little highlights everywhere around you, okay? Even if you have all the lights turned out and, you know, you're watching this in the dark. But, you know, on our pads like this, there's some highlights. You can see the highlights right there and there that are really reflecting. Here's a black pad, okay? But here's these little highlights, you know, on this pad right here, this whole area around here, okay? Especially like that. There it is right there, okay? My pen here, you know, so there's a highlight right there. Okay, but what I'm getting at right here, I've always kind of added these little specular light, I think that's what they call it, light that's brighter than white, into my pieces, but proportionately, you know, I would add those, and I'll still do it like on a distant mountain that's supposed to be, you know, 20 miles away from me or something like that. Maybe it represents reflective snow or something like that. But adding it on closer things like this, you know, these bows like this, okay, that are really close, proportionately, that those little dots make the most amount of sense on close objects like that, because, you know, that's really the size of these little highlights that, you know, surround us, like that one right there, that, you know, that little dot right there of light, okay? It just makes sense on things that are really close up to us. I mean, I'm doing it on distant objects like those little rocks down there too. And I mean, I think it looks good, but it just really makes sense on the close up objects in terms of the scale of this little dot right here, okay? So that's just a little aside. It's like I don't know, after I did that night, I think I was going to sleep and I was thinking, oh, that's why these dots look so good on the large limbs that I was doing. I think it was on the video on lighting, if you watch that one. I was thinking, man, these things look awesome on this. But I didn't really think about it. But I thought, it's because the dot, the little reflective light, is proportionate to those a lot more so than kind of more distant objects. Okay, so let's go with a little bit of this texture here. We're at the 20-minute mark, done a lot of layering on there. It's, there's a lot of layers of color in there. We've done some highlighting down there. We've created our light source, and we're just going to finish off with some Dr. Martin's Bleed Proof White on a paintbrush here. I mean, not a paintbrush, but a toothbrush, okay? And you know what I think the closest thing to this is whiteout, okay? Now this is a opaque white watercolor paint, okay? People do brush calligraphy with it, dip pen calligraphy. A lot of calligraphers use this type of stuff. Illustrators use it a lot too. But, I've known people to take like correctional pens or something like that and do kind of, they hit it against something and kind of it gives a little bit of splatter and it looks good too. It's a really great solution to that. If they don't have this. But you can also just go dot by dot and add some dots in there with your white paint pen too, or your white gel pen, okay? This one right here just does it really fast and it's a little bit more random, which I like. Okay, you get a little bit of a larger dot, smaller dot. Kind of have to play around with the consistency of your bleed-proof white if you're doing this with the paint. I mean, maybe the toothbrush makes a difference too. I don't always get kind of what I want. Now, this one's really looking great. I have a lot of variety in terms of the dots. I don't want, a dime-sized blob of paint in there or something like that, but look how good this looks right here. And that took like no time at all to splatter. So don't super, load this up. I only load up about right here, okay, this little tiny bit of this tip. And then I really, wiped a lot of it back into the bottle. But this one, I think I don't know, I made it a little bit thinner, I think. So you have these kind of dots about that size. And so that little spray pattern is really small. Right in there, it's like barely visible, right? But you can see, even that, see this like really super tiny dots down there? That is still really quite white, okay? So that's the thing about the bleed-proof white. It is very, very opaque, okay? Now, that dries really fast. The bleed-proof white, it's very chalky. So something like this, I'd always recommend spraying with a Krylon acrylic spray. You can get a crystal clear, something like that at the hardware store if you don't have an art store around. I don't think they'd have they have clear sprays that you can use from like a hardware store, and they're usually in the spray paint section. Could be in the stains section too, but you can use those too, okay? But if you have like a art store around, maybe going with something more like an art spray is a better idea. But hey, I've been in places where, in a pinch, or just to save money, people used hairspray, okay? And that kind of creates, it creates a nice coating on it. It might yellow over time, who knows, but do you really care about what something's going to look like in 30 years, I don't, so I'm absolutely fine with it. And it also, when you have that amount of saturation of color, it really increases the depth of it, okay? Sometimes these colors that you lay down look really fantastic when they're wet and freshly applied. And then it dries and it's like, oh my God, what happened to the depth, the saturation, the viscosity, the look of it? And that's because it dried kind of with a dull sheen. It didn't fade out, unless you had it out in the sun or something like that. But what it does is it dries to a dull sheen, and when you spray it, it usually gets rid of that sheen. It penetrates it a little bit more, and then it has, hopefully permanently, usually permanently, the look of a freshly coated, inked up piece, and a lot of depth in those colors like that. And then when you get that, it also creates a lot more separation between the color richness and the whiteness of both the bleed-proof white and things like your white paint pen. All right. Okay. So one more thing. I almost forgot. I was going to do this. I thought of a good title for this piece, and I thought it would be called. Oh gosh, I already forgot. It was the Snow and Mist, or something like that. Um, but let's hit this with a little, or a lot, I don't know, of white pigment ink. Okay. On a 100% cotton ball, use 100% cotton, okay? If you're doing this type of effect, you might be able to muscle it with an acrylic one. I really have a very difficult time using kind of those synthetic cotton applicators. Okay, this is kind of fraying, so when I dab it into this, and I pull it off, it's kind of like fraying a little bit and sticking up. So you just take this and you smash it down to get a nice flat edge. And when you also smash it down, you're pushing some of that paint into the surface right there. So you're not just dealing with it on the surface. It's a little bit built up, and that it creates a little bit more of a kind of a better consistency. Okay, where do we put this? It looks best where light meets dark. Okay, so we have this bow in here. These bows are kind of being bottom lit relative to light. So I'm going to go like this, and I'm going to start in the light. White over light doesn't show up at all, but then you move it into those objects that are darker than it, where it really shows up, and then you get that lighting on the bow like that. See that? It makes for a softer, varied impression, okay? See this one right here? Let's put a little bit on that, okay? Now you don't have to put on everything. I think it looks best kind of oscillated a little bit. Okay, so see that black there? Now it's kind of a gray, right? But that's what it looks like from, looking at it distance, okay? Now we have these green ones in here as well, so we'll get a lighter green. Okay. Like so, this one hanging down here, I'll top light it, light it a little bit, like that. Also, when you're putting it over these clouds, it doesn't really show up too much, but it does make them a little bit softer and more billowy. There's some little treetops right over the cabin, and I will apply this to some of them like this, okay? And I'll leave some of them just as is. So there's kind of an oscillation of this mist coming in here. So you see, if I did it over the whole thing, I think it would look pretty good, but I think it's best when you vary it in there. It creates more variety than something just static, okay? You see this? Let's hit that more distant bow, okay? The green ones represent some, a bow a little bit farther away. I put a little bit too much, so you just kind of wipe it off like that. All right, let's see that little area in there. It's kind of light. And let's put some down here in the water. So there's lighting in here. You can call that snow lighting. I mean, after all, it's very white, okay? So it's a very crisp version of white, because it's a splatter painted tiny dot, very crisp little dot. But this is a way to go in. This is the way we're going into our piece here, and we're adding in a very soft textural contrast to that splatter paint, okay? So from a textural standpoint, we play around with color a lot in stamping, just in all forms of crafting, okay? There's colors, and there's a big, heavy emphasis on colors, as there should be, okay? There's a lot of different types of ink pads and things like that. But with just two simple things, a little dot created by a paint pen, and some just extra white pigment ink applied with a cotton ball, This is not just for scenes. This is, I can do this on anything. If you're stamping out a word stamp or something like that, you can, put some pigment ink over the words in some area, and then it looks like there's lighting kind of enveloping your word stamps or something like that. There aren't a lot of textural things in stamping, and you can create that textural contrast and variation, and that's a big part of visual kind of vocabulary, okay? And it can be achieved in just a simple way. And you don't have to do it over a lot of it. If you just do it over a couple things, you can put a little white dot, like on the top of like lettering too, like word stamps again. So instead it looks like a three-dimensional word that's kind of sticking out and embossed by putting in a little bit of a dot on it, like a reflective dot. So there's all kinds of things that you can do like that in your pieces. And that's just a little trick. It puts things kind of over the top in terms of, from a textural standpoint. All right, so I added quite a bit of mist in there just because I wanted to make my piece, and that's the title of this piece, kind of the mist and the snow and the mist or something like that. I don't know, I wanted to kind of emphasize that. So you can see this mist all around in here. But see, I didn't put it out here because that's an area that's darker. There's this perimeter on there that's darker. But kind of in here, I start adding it in here, creep it out in here from the water area, kind of crept it up all the way into those trees from the bottom, okay? So I added quite a bit of it down here, okay? But now, looking at this, can you see where the antique linen came into play? I mean, you can really tell, can't you?